don't know how live we are, but hello. Let me zoom in. I'm sorry. This camera has a zoom setting, but doesn't seem to be letting me use it. All right. No point in futzing with it. Now you can see everything that I'm doing. So hopefully that's fun because the painting's this big. So this is my photo ref. This is my snack. I'm sure we'll all love hearing that. This is my gouache palette. So I did a little video on this palette. I really like it. It's a sticker from Ben Sears. So this palette has been getting a lot of use. It's a little gunky, but in a good way. So yeah, I've got a bunch of lights going, but it's dark here and there's no good light setup ever really in our lives. So I'm going to do my best to make this easy for you to see. That might also involve throwing a lot of shadows. So yeah, the other thing I'm going to do, I do record time lapses of these as best I can, so I'm just going to get that going. Up here, I have my cell phone. It can zoom in. It's zoomed in great. All right, time lapse, let's go. So, got this hot mess. I've got green. That probably won't show up. So, yeah, so this is an underpainting I did a couple days ago. It's just a blend of the paints I had left on my palette from the last painting I did. So these are all the greens. So I feel like it's nice to start with a neutral. I mean, if you watch any of James Gurney's videos or read his books, he does a lot of underpaintings in like casein or other things that aren't going to get picked up. This is gouache. It could get picked up, but my life will go on if it does. So my photo is one I took today. Ooh, the auto exposure is fun, eh? Sorry about this. We're just doing our best. So yeah, so this one that I took today, I went walking in a ravine near some restaurants. I don't know. A cafe. We did not go in the cafe. We just went in the ravine and saw a lot of different things. And this is a little macro shot I took. I'm going to try and see if, do you think orange will show up? It does. So I'm going to do a really rough drawing of this in this space so that I have a guide. Sort of hoping that doing something so macro will let me actually have a little bit more fun with the shapes. One of the neat things was this little sort of rivulet friend. So lots of cute little bubbles, ripples. I really love the water here. Okay, we've got some moss on this stone. There's a lot of leaves. In this ravine, actually, it looked kind of apocalyptic. It was clear that like the last few big windstorms we had knocked down, God, it could be a full third of all the trees in there. And as I'm drawing this oak leaf, I'm reminded that they were probably mostly oaks because we've had a lot of problems with the moths that come and lay their larvae and eat the oaks and weaken them. So my partner was wondering if they were dead because of the moths, and I was wondering if they were just sort of weakened because of the moths. And then the wind came. The wind times came. So yeah, it's gonna be a really sunny ravine this year. And I've read enough about like ecosystem and forest growth and change to know that there's like definitely trees in there that have been waiting for this moment exactly to come, and they are ready to jump up and take over all of that sunlight that is suddenly available to them. So I know it's not an unmitigated tragedy that these trees fall down. but it looked real dark at the moment. And because it's a public park in a city, they had to like chop up the ones that have fallen on the pathway and like sort of make them safe. So there's all these like sawed up logs, and unless you go looking for the roots that have been pulled out, you might think that somebody came and just cleared a bunch of trees. And they probably did come and clear trees that were looking sketchy, right? Like what you don't want is for trees to fall on the path and destroy things. They just did fall on the path and destroy things. So yeah, one of the things I liked about this is there's a lot of growth in that stream, little water plants sprouting up. And that's, it's like very pretty, because otherwise where I am, it's been freezing for 3 weeks now. We had some beautiful warm weather the very first week of like March, and then back to snow. So it goes. But it means that things haven't really kicked into gear yet, growth-wise. But yeah. I kind of zone a little bit probably, but I'll keep an eye, see how things are going. If you have questions, I invite you to use the chat. That's what it's for. And I like talking to people, and I like talking shop. So if you're around and you have questions, I honestly would enjoy answering them, I think. Okay. So the other thing that I'm going to do is kind of pick a palette that isn't like exactly realistic. I feel like I have a chance with this one to experiment more because it's so macro. What I will do right now is actually go in and just throw in some of those darks. The other thing that might happen in the middle of this video is I'm going to have to go refill this palette because the black paint is almost out, the ultramarine is almost out, the teal is almost out, the phthalo is almost out, the purple's almost out, the white's almost out. I didn't think I would actually like use this very quickly, but I did. So yeah, I'm getting a little bit of black paint. And what could we tint it with? Let's grab some purple. Okay, there's more purple than I thought there. So I'm just making a purple wash. Stay with me, iPad. To lay in some of these darks to try and just get my value pattern in, to start before things get too wacky and I get lost, which is a very likely thing to happen with all of this water. Actually got some really lovely new wash colors that it would be nice to kind of fill up these with once I actually properly empty them. One of them is an absolutely gorgeous teal cyan. Oh, I can't think of it's like a blue-green, brighter than a seafoam green. There's definitely a word I'm looking for, but will I ever find it? Stay tuned. I do also often have music going, but I did not get a chance to add music credits to my description because I didn't get that until it was too late. So, whoops. Just imagine music. We could all just imagine some nice lo-fi, or just go get some nice music playing around you. This is, this is actually very compatible with me that I'm not forcing you to listen to particular music. You can go find the music of your choosing. All right, throwing in some purpley black. Just futzing around with YouTube. Don't mind me. I'm going to do a thing I don't normally do and actually lay in a couple of the whites right now. I have a weird sense of concern that I will fully lose them. They're not going to be that opaque, but hopefully opaque enough that I can find them again and keep track of them. Okay, we got some water highlights. So I have actually 3 different water jugs here because better safe than sorry, and it does take a lot of water to clean a gouache brush. So I've put my webcam on my monitor arm, which should reduce wobble, but it is still likely going to wobble a little bit because it's a bouncy monitor arm. All right, well, let's mix up some fun greens. Get some greens in here. This is a Viridian green, which is very nice. Actually, the phthalo green I'm going to replace this with when I use it up, which is a lot darker. It's just a different vibe. And I have a much darker green blue to replace the phthalo blue. What shall I do? Well, let's make some of that really, spring baby leaf green to start. So sometimes I start with a much, 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 much bigger brush, but today it doesn't make sense. It's a painting without any really big flat areas, right? I'm not painting flat surfaces. We're getting a little white in there. I'm not doing anything of that sort. So a bigger brush, while certainly very fun in many situations, just would be awkward here, I think. There's that almost neon green I'm looking for. And sort of a lemon yellow and Viridian. Sorry, thinking is not at top speed today. Just chugging along, brain-wise. I hope that's fun. Anyways, I hope this is a chill hang. I will probably go silent for stretches of time, but I'm here and I will try and keep an eye out for questions or just check-ins because I see you there watching and I would love to know how you're doing today. How has your Monday been? I went and looked at a bunch of fallen trees in a ravine, and I think we can all say that was a memorable, slightly harrowing experience. Honestly, very kind of nice to be out in nature as well. And there weren't actually that many other people. Just the benefit, being able to be slightly flexible in your workday commitments. Benefit I just heckin' love. It's really nice to sort of go off peak. It's not always a thing I can do, but it's delightful when I can. We're getting like a whole swoop here. Which I do enjoy. So these are just pieces of cotton cargo pants that died a sad death years and years ago that I ripped up for paint rags. At the time, I meant them to be oil painting rags, but I don't oil paint anymore, and these ones never got terped. So I just had them in a box with extra other things. I have a bunch of jeans also that dyed that I tore up into oil painting rags. Jeans, denim, not very absorbent. Great probably for oil paint, but not useful for gouache. But cotton really wants to hold water. I tried all of these other sorts of paint rags, towels, dishcloths, those, what are they called? Microfiber cloths, trying to find anything to compete with like a paper towel in terms of absorbency. I should have just been cutting up a t-shirt. Lesson learned. So now mixing some ultramarine and some yellow ochre. Make a really warm, really neutral green. Right? Like we couldn't even really call that an olive. It's like a khaki green. I'm just gonna lay in a couple of shadows on these little guys with this. I definitely want these greens to be like the darkest colors in the painting. Or sorry, not the darkest. The most saturated colors in the painting, I think. Really get that. Or at least that's my thinking. Yeah. If you're watching this and you enjoy watching me paint, I'm going to be doing an informative and much better planned art demo as part of the online convention happening this weekend, Flights of Foundry. I think my demo's like Saturday morning, like it might be like 9 or 9:30. But that's Toronto time, so maybe you're somewhere where that's a more reasonable time to be awake. Mix up a slightly warmer green. Sorry, I said saturated warm green. But yeah, I'm gonna do a watercolor demo, I think, for that one. I've always wanted to kind of demo some of the things I do when I'm making a watercolor map. So it seemed like a good opportunity. I'll also be doing an art showcase, sort of hosting a zine themed hangout. Bring your favorite zines, show off your zines, talk about making zines. I don't know, we've got an hour in a room, and there are so many other wonderful zine things, including a self-publishing panel I'll be moderating. So yeah, I don't know, come check it out. Flights of Foundry is what it's called. Boy, this doesn't look like anything in the camera, eh? I need to not look at that. That will not help me. I'm just going to adjust my window on the YouTube so I see less of my stream and more of the chat. And that should, oh, I can just pop out the chat. That's what we like. That way I don't have to see me. But do hop in the chat if you notice anything going wrong with the stream, is what I mean. Anyways, get it together, iPad. Yeah. So I'm doing this Plein April, which is 30 days of painting a day. I've tried painting challenges before. I've tried drawing and inking challenges. I've tried Inktober. What's the Mermaid? Fay Brewery. There's a bunch of great ones. But it turns out I usually just sort of like get distracted, wander off into other projects pretty quickly. So my hope is, because I just like painting in general, and I honestly would be painting something right now, with or without this challenge, that I will be able to stay focused. We'll see. it is nice to produce a bunch of work. I did just a 7-day challenge. When was that? Over the solstice in December, just as a way to kind of paint something. And I just did virtual planners, which is when you paint from Google Street View, which is very fun. That was really satisfying because it really did get me in the zone with my artwork in a way that I haven't been in a while. I really felt like I was able to accomplish some way more ambitious paintings after, kind of doing one a day for a few days. So I'm kind of hoping that we'll hit something like that here, but that does require me continuing with it. I do like painting. I will say, even if I find myself missing days, I feel like this is the month to do it. I'm between big contracts. I have some contract freelance, like some single one-off freelance pieces, and they're just, not quite as heavy a workload as when I have the big contract going. And that just seems like the right time to try taking on a larger sort of project, but also just like something that gets me using the paints more. I would like there to be a world where I get hired to paint in gouache, but I haven't really taken the time to figure out what the difference is between how I paint with gouache in a sort of study / exercise kind of documentary way versus like how I might make an illustration with it. And I probably need to figure that out. So one of the colors I have here is Naples Yellow. Oh, dog burp. Which is a convenience color in watercolors. All bunch of gouache colors and convenience colors because I'm using much of my gouache is Winsor Newton designer gouache, and it's all ready to be used kind of straight out of the tube as opposed to doing a ton of mixing. I've bought more sort of mixing oriented gouache colors and tubes recently. But I'm also trying to just get to know how to use the gouache I already own. And Naples Yellow is a color that I have heard so many people enjoy working with, and I could not find the appeal of. So I'm trying. Let the record show. I have it on my palette. I am mixing it into things. It is a paint color. It's, it works kind of like a white in terms of mixing, where it's going to neutralize things a little bit. Like it's kind of a peach color. Very, 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 very faint peach color, or I don't know, what's that color? The palest foundation they make. It's got a little bit of hue to it, but not much. So trying to figure out where it sits on my neutrals to mixing colors to, etc. It's just a process. Yeah, I might have to go refill that ultramarine soon. So I do a lot of my work in watercolor as well, and I've been collecting watercolor. I've been in a very watercolor-focused experimenting phase for a couple of years now, and I feel like I'm learning a bit about like my own tastes, and also how I have a voice in my head that when somebody says something like, oh, this is a really important standard basic thing you should have in your kit, that some little aspect of my personality wants to be like, well, I don't need that. I'm blah, 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 blah. I don't even know what attribute I'm attempting to have in these conversations. It's not very well thought out. But it means that, like, when I decided to start using professional caliber watercolors instead of the Winsor Newton sort of Cotman brand, which are solid, good watercolors, but student grade, so they tend to not be as pigmented, and have more sort of, like I said, sort of convenience mixes. So when I decided I wanted to switch over to the good shit, I was like, I don't need ultramarine or burnt umber or all of these other basics that you would get in a basic watercolor kit. And so I built up a collection of watercolor paints, a lot of Daniel Smith colors that honestly we would call eccentric, because they did not achieve much in terms of becoming a useful mixing palette. But there are many wonderful paints in there, and I don't regret owning them. I just had to keep using my Cotman paints for a long time because you do need a warm blue. There's not that many warm blues. So yeah. In fact, when you go looking for warm blues, sometimes you end up being given a cold blue because it's really hard to tell what's a warm blue and what's a cold blue in this funny world of color temperature. So one of the colors that I, much like the Naples Yellow, I really didn't think of as a mixing color was this Orange Lake. It's very, very opaque, even for gouache. And I didn't know if I wanted to use it or how I would want to use it, Having trouble getting the paints the right thick consistency tonight. But yeah, I was excited to try it out, but I also didn't know what I expected it to do or what I was supposed to do with it. Here we go. We're getting some color on here now. So I've been learning. It is a really potent color, the sort of pigment strength. It's gonna win in a fight with other colors a lot of the time. I sort of took a scoop of color and I laid it out in my palette, and now I can pull from it. That lets me not have to really clean my brush before getting more of that color. It's sort of a little shortcut, because I don't want to get these too filthy. They are going to get dirty, right? Like you can see the yellow. That lemon yellow perpetually has other colors in it. There is nothing I can do about that. You can't get your brush clean enough that it won't show up in the lemon yellow, is what I'm saying. But my goal is to reduce that. Maybe is how we'll put it. So doing that where I sort of scoop it out and lay it on the actual mixing palette does get me sort of around that a bit. Not really sure how long I should stream for. Probably gonna lose my voice at a certain point. Might not finish this painting on stream, but let's see. It's been about half an hour. I do want to sort of finish this in one sitting, so even if I stop streaming, I would keep painting, because I need these to be done one a day, and we don't really have time to stretch that timeline out, All right, getting some warmer colors in here. I like neutrals, but the point of them is to let me get away with some really saturated colors. So let's get them both going. All right. So the other thing I do, I like to dip my brush, because it's full of like quite thick gouache paint, and then scrape the wet brush on my paint rags, because that's going to get a lot of the paint out of my brush before I completely soak or flood my water with paint. One of the things I've been thinking of, so when you're doing oil painting, we used odorless mineral spirits when I was taught. You can take your paint-filled mineral spirits, you've been cleaning your brush in there all day, and it might look completely milky or murky or completely opaque with paint. If you let it sit for a couple of days, really doesn't take many, all that paint is going to settle to the bottom, and you can pour off the 99% clean mineral spirit, and you can just reuse them. And I have a suspicion that gouache and watercolor pigment, much of it will also pour off, or will settle down, and then I could pour stuff off. So I'm thinking about that. Okay, let's mix some blues for the water. This is my phthalo blue. It's okay. It's gonna need to be darker though. Try mixing in a little of those. Very thick and gunky paint. A little burnt sienna, burnt umber. Yeah, see, now we've got this really, really nice sort of greenish color. And that's going to be really nice as one of the temperatures of the water that we have going here. So like I mentioned, the underpainting is also gouache. And one of the problems that I'm going to have with this is I'm going to occasionally pick it up by using really wet paint on here. And that's going to allow the paint underneath to kind of get saturated with water and become movable, which is not what we're looking for. So that's something I've got to keep an eye out for and remember to use thicker paint. Okay, that was pretty fun. If we grab some of this stuff over here and we mix in a little bit of purple. They're a really saturated color, but let's see what that does. I mean, I like blue. I like purple. I'm going to keep going with it. It's pretty dark, which is really my main concern. So, yeah, time lapse is still going. You can see the paint starting to dry, and actually it does lighten quite a bit as it dries. Some colors are going to lighten more than others. The phthalo blue is quite light at its darkest, most concentrated level, so it makes sense that it then lightens whatever it's mixed into as it dries. I did sort of pick a pretty dark background for this one, so most things are going to look lighter than the background I'm painting it. What's nice though is this paper is quite textured, so at a certain point I am going to be able to get away with some nice textured effects. So I've got to mix this very sandy color on the bottom, and I don't know what I want to do with it. What I'm going to do, though, is just pop into Twitter and remind them I'm here streaming, because that's something I try and do halfway through. Alrighty, back at it. Okay. Getting a lot of mess here. Let's take this purple, mix it with a little bit of that green. So that makes a really lovely blue on its own. and see how dark we can get that. I know I said I was going to deal with that sandy bottom, but I'm not. Not yet. I'm doing this now. The trick is to not get hung up on each painting being perfect, as much as to just go through each painting, start to finish. Which means there has to be a separate measure of when you're done that isn't when it's perfect, because that will not be effective. So my new measure of am I finished is going to be, have I filled every spot with paint? I'm going to go slowly. I'm not going to rush it, but that's the question to ask myself as I go. Is there paint everywhere? There isn't. Could I add some more? Could we get some more paint up in here? Probably what I need to do is bring in some really bright colors soon, because this is all kind of, you squint, mostly one value. And that's fixable. That's actually a problem I usually have with gouache. So I've been down this path before. So I hear that it's good to have a schedule when you stream, but it turns out I only want to do this occasionally and not really on a schedule. So I was wondering, maybe it would make sense to not so much schedule finished works of art on stream, but schedule stream hangouts and see if I can hang out with someone else who's a professional at the same time. I don't know, would that be something you'd be interested in, hearing shop talk from multiple people? I don't really know who right now, but poke around and ask people. One of the things is that a lot of this sort of communities I was really involved in before the pandemic started, I've just sort of not had the energy to stay involved. I'm very focused on sort of my home base, which right now is working with DMG first and foremost. And as much as I enjoy getting involved for sort of fun short-term projects, I don't feel like I can sink my teeth into any other community in terms of having the energy right now to do that. So I feel like I don't have that much relevant conversation to have on other subjects. But there's a lot of people that hasn't stopped, so why should it stop me? I mean, it does stop me at least a little bit, but maybe I'm being a little too critical. I don't know. The world is really dark and heavy, and it's very easy to feel like I have to be contributing to dramatic improvement thereof. And so much of the things that are going on right now are so big and systematic and global, and I need to remember to keep my efforts here at home, and then also, like, I don't need to do them live on TV. I do things that I can do, and it's not a performance. So it's nice to just sort of hang out and shoot the shit, as it were, instead of feeling like I have to be a genius and solve everything and only contribute. Because I'm not taking up anybody else's space here, I guess is the thing, right? This is a very big platform with a lot of people on it. a lot of people creating work, a lot of people watching work. I don't think putting a real dent in the bandwidth. Hopefully I'm not flooding any tags. I don't know. I'll mull it over. Is there some fun, thrilling topic you'd love to hear me talk on? Tell me now in the chat or in a comment. Yeah, we gotta get some like opaque light colors going in here now. That does help actually quite a lot, eh? There's always something. There's always some stage where it goes from being a hot mess to looking like something. And it's not done, right? By my own measure, it's not done yet. But it's going somewhere and doing something, and that is a relief. I don't know if you're watching this, if you are someone who makes artwork, but I would bet that there's similar stages in other media. I mean, definitely when I'm cooking, if I'm baking, there's always a stage where it goes from being kind of a buttery, eggy mess in a bowl to being a cake batter to being, recognizably something that will turn into a cake at some point. And this is currently recognizably something that will turn into a nice up close picture of some water. These, not so good yet, but we'll get there. I did suspect that the forest floor covered in dead leaves and twigs might be a bit of a challenge, and I wasn't wrong. That's kind of why I picked this. I found it intriguing. I love a good piece of macro photography. This isn't my best macro photography, but it's not. It's something nice to work with. Anyways, I'm feeling defensive apparently tonight about the quality of my macro photography. I apologize. You didn't come here for that. I will say water is really fun in terms of like learning what the marks indicate. I would like to paint more of it, which is good because it's one of the potential themes for this year's Plein April challenge. So one way or another, I'm going to be painting more water. It's white. And there's a very neutral color. That is, I think, the lightest color on the water that isn't essentially a glaring sky highlight. So let's see what we can mix up. Might feel a little bit neutral. What I want, most important, is sort of a temperature shift with this blue. Now I was outside today and the blue isn't super accurate, largely because we didn't have the like blue sky. It was a hazy sort of afternoon, which is why the light isn't particularly direct in this. And no, I did not turn off notifications on my iPad. I fully forgot. having so many Discord conversations? I do think this neutral color is working. I will give myself that. Snack break. So we got off-brand mini eggs. I'm trying to decide what we might call them. I like the idea of diminutive egg, because that sounds overly complicated the way other off-brand things sometimes are. Doesn't really roll off the tongue though. So, what are some other fun, slightly awkward words for mini? It's going to be hard to make the ground look like it's underneath the surface of the water. But I'm not going to get better at it if I don't fuck it up a couple of times first. So, here we go. Don't think that is quite dark enough. But I do think that is a fixable issue. It's one of the things I like about gouache in particular. In comparison to watercolor. So it's a lot easier to just paint over your mistakes. It's kind of a just keep swimming situation, you know? It's actually totally possible to recover something just by continuing to go. Just continue to paint. So there's like a very rich, very dark color in the water. The absolute darkest possible color in the water, and it is dark and warm. I have to get all of the white out of my brush. It's a good way to ruin a good dark mix. I'll let that brush soak just a sec. Thanks for your patience. Okay, that should be good. I'm going to use this mixing area because this is becoming a lot. Let's get our brown paint, red paint. Sorry, that was the black paint first, then the brown paint. We do green paint. It's trying everything. And so the purple paint. Okay. So purple and red and black. Red and green and black. Black and purple. The real trick is to get like a very specific consistency to your watercolor or your gouache paint, or it like easily flows off the brush. If it doesn't pick up anything underneath it, isn't so wet that it's affecting other paint, isn't dripping. It's a process. One of my goals with this palette was to learn more about exactly what that consistency is, because I think for me, that was one of the hardest things to understand. Because I kept using gouache kind of out of the tube onto the palette and then let it dry and then kind of try and rehydrate it, and then that doesn't really work. And then I'm like, gouache sucks. But it doesn't actually suck. It is me who sucks. And I've learned my lesson. So, it's okay. Okay. We're getting there with the water. It's closer than you might think. Going back in for my blue and white combo. Also, you know what? These guys are all drying a little bit. We have the heat on due to the freezing cold that is our climate right now. So let's not let anything dry up too much. Use an eyedropper instead of a spray bottle, because the spray bottle does tend to actually kind of move everything around a whole bunch in a way I'm not that into. You know how it is. Yes, I've created a particular warm light blue, cold light blue. Oh my goodness. Temperatures of blue. Yes, I made a particular one to stretch over the sort of sandy areas. Honestly, I like it. If you're wondering, like, am I going to just use the same brush the whole time? The answer is probably yes. I will sometimes get out another brush, but if you don't have to. I mix a really tiny amount of the perfect brown. So we gotta make it count. Well, I'm giving myself, maybe one day a week where I really spend, a couple hours on a painting I can be really proud of. Unfortunately, today is not that day. So let's get something on the page, folks. So we're going to mix up a very chunky, warm green that I can kind of scumble. Let's take a bunch off my brush. It's way too wet to scumble, but that's okay. We're just making a textural mess now. And honestly, that's fine. My life will go on. Sometimes what you are making is a textural mess. There we go. There's some scumble. Honestly, that looks great. Very proud of that scumble. It's a little too wet, as we mentioned. I don't really want it moving on its own, but I'm going to do. The other thing that would be nice to get good at is like loading up a couple of different things on the brush, you know? What I'm saying is I've got planes. Okay. So I'm going to start using these darks we mixed for the water. I'm going to use them in the pile of leaves. I talked a big game about just using the same size brush for a while, but I think these might go better, the smaller, blockier approach. Because this brush is so big, I'm using it kind of calligraphically. But this brush might be the right size. So I've learned also to get a brush like fully saturated, you kind of gotta really squish it around in there. All right. Let's paint some leaves. So I'm using this to make small rectangular marks, which I think are going to better read abstractly as sort of like crumbled leaves. And I'm trying to let the colors go a little bit darker so we can have a little bit more variation that way. And I'm going to make everything get really light. So you can kind of see what I'm thinking. I don't think it's working a hundo, but I'm only going to learn how to do it if I try. So that's what today is for. I gotta wrap this up though. I really wanted to kind of get these done in like under an hour. We are over an hour. So what can I add to make this read good? How do you make paint good? It's okay, I'm tired of myself. A long career in this single room. That's what's so nice about streaming. In theory. Let's make a sort of opaque brown. Clearly, my issue is no gamboge, because that's a much nicer color. Some of these weird pinks I've been using. They're fine, but they need to be. It looks a lot more like fall with some of this on it, I think. And a couple of well, you're nearly out of black paint, friends. I think the last thing to do, left my brush in the water, don't do that. Bad move. Anyways, I think the last thing to do is to get some white, pure white, right out of the tube white paint going on this. So bubbles on the water. Okay. Dry brushing is hard. There we go. For the record, I wasn't sure that this swirly approach was going to work, but actually it looks great and I'm a genius. I mean, you can kind of see what I mean, really. It really is a moment where suddenly it's going to come together. And you cannot predict it at the start. Or I can't. Maybe that's something I'm going to get better at. That would be really nice. It's like, it's okay. Just keep painting. Stop being stressed and just keep painting. And then it'll be fun. I mean, I know it in my heart. It's going to be fun. It's just be lovely to have more of a game plan. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is bulk up those plants in the water. First order of business is some dark green for their shadows. Some white, some extremely bright yellow, a little more water. Pick up what green is here. And it's a plant. It's a plant. So I'm trying to use a few different color temperatures of green. I'm really trying not to worry about painting individual leaves despite what I would describe as a very strong temptation to do so. Just let these plants be plants. Yeah. I'm going to take a little bit. This sort of black and green and brown combo. Just lay some shadows in. And a few of them, especially these ones that are like really in the running. And the last thing you're gonna do is just take some right out of the tube black paint, lay a little bit of that in. It does help, right? Really just kind of brings the focus in a bit. Which I think helps. Okay, so the last stuff that I think needs some love are some of these leaves. I'm just going to go with this neutral green. Pick up some of these pink zones. Just a little bit more. Mix this in more of an olive. So green and red, blue and orange are all going to sort of vibrate against each other, right? So that's the idea with these sorts of colors, to let them just sort of express themselves by yelling at each other. Oh, it ain't perfect, but they're never perfect. And like I said, my main concern is that I've covered the canvas, and I believe we can all look at this and say that that is a lot of paint and that that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm done. And thank you if you watched all of this. I appreciate you taking the time and checking it out. Oh my God, it's mirrored. Wow, I don't understand webcams at all. I'll try streaming from my phone again next time. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good night. Bye.